The funeral director's voice droned on, but I couldn't focus on anything except Victoria's perfectly manicured hand gripping the microphone. My father had been dead for 3 days, and she was already rewriting history. Before we conclude, Victoria announced, her voice cutting through the murmured prayers, I need to address a difficult matter. She turned toward me, her eyes cold behind her designer sunglasses. My stepdaughter has been removed from Howard's will. The decision was his, made in sound mind last month. The chapel fell silent. 200 pairs of eyes swung toward me like searchlights. My breath caught in my throat. Beside Victoria, my half-brother Kyle smirked, arms crossed over his expensive suit. He'd been waiting for this moment. Furthermore, Victoria continued, pulling a folded paper from her purse, Naomi will need to vacate the family home within 30 days. She walked down the aisle and handed me the eviction notice. Her perfume, the same scent she'd worn the day she married my father, made my stomach turn. This is Dad's funeral, I whispered, my hands shaking as I stared at the official letterhead. Howard wanted clean transitions, she replied loud enough for everyone to hear. No drama. But this was drama. Public humiliation at my father's graveside. Hi, I'm Naomi Fletcher, 42 years old, from Portland, Oregon. If you're watching this, please subscribe to my channel for more stories about justice, patience, and the truth that always surfaces. You won't believe where this journey takes me. After the funeral, I drove to my aunt's house, desperate for support. Aunt Phyllis had known my mother, had watched me grow up, had promised to always be there. She opened the door with a tight smile. Naomi, this is difficult for everyone. She gave me an eviction notice at Dad's funeral, I said, my voice breaking. In front of everyone. Phyllis glanced behind her, where Uncle Bernard stood in the hallway, arms crossed. Victoria said you'd been difficult lately. That you demanded money from Howard when he was sick. That's a lie. I stepped forward, but Phyllis raised her hand. I can't get involved in family disputes, especially with inheritance. Victoria has legal documents. She showed them to Bernard. Her voice softened, but her message remained firm. Maybe it's time to accept reality and move forward. I called my cousin Troy next. We'd been close as children, spent summers together at my grandparents' lake house. Look, Naomi, he said before I could finish explaining, Victoria's telling everyone you were trying to manipulate Dad into changing his will. She has witnesses. What witnesses? Her attorney.
Kyle.
The hospice nurse. He sighed. I believe you, but I can't afford to take sides. My business contracts with some of Victoria's associates. One by one, my relatives chose silence over support. Power had spoken and they listened. I spent the next week sorting through my father's belongings that Victoria allowed me to take. 3 boxes of memories she deemed worthless. Old baseball cards, my mother's cookbook, Dad's college textbooks. At the bottom of the 3rd box, I found a manila envelope with my name written in Dad's handwriting. The postmark was dated 2 weeks after his death. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Dad's distinctive scrawl. Naomi, if you're reading this, then things went exactly as I predicted. Don't panic. Don't confront anyone. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. The truth lives in patience, not anger. Remember what I taught you about chess. Sometimes you sacrifice the queen to win the game. Trust the process. Trust yourself. The lawyer's name is Bernard Whitmore. He's waiting for your call, but only when you're ready. Love always, Dad. I read the letter 5 times, searching for hidden meaning. Bernard Whitmore wasn't our family attorney. That was Victoria's man, Preston Hughes. Who was Whitmore? I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my wallet. Dad's words felt like a lifeline thrown across impossible distance. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by boxes, and reread those sentences until they were memorized. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. What did he mean? The moving truck arrived on day 28. Victoria stood on the front porch of my childhood home, supervising like a general reviewing troops. She'd hired the movers herself, claiming she wanted efficiency. Careful with that lamp, she called out as two men carried my grandmother's antique through the doorway. It's valuable. Then maybe I should keep it, I said quietly. Victoria turned, her expression sharp. Everything in this house belongs to Howard's estate, which means it belongs to me. Kyle appeared behind her, eating an apple. You're 42, Naomi. Most people your age have already established themselves. He bit into the apple, juice dribbling down his chin. It's kind of sad, really. Starting over this late. I watched the movers load furniture I'd grown up with. My mother's rocking chair, my father's desk, the dining table where we'd shared thousands of meals. Victoria had marked each piece with colored tags. Keep, donate, trash. Most of my childhood was marked donate. The house will be listed next week, Victoria informed me. Kyle's fiancée has excellent taste. She's already planning renovations. I bit my tongue. 3 months ago, Kyle had been unemployed. Now he was spending my inheritance on weddings and renovations. As I drove away, I looked back once. Kyle stood in my father's office window, phone pressed to his ear, probably bragging to friends about his windfall. I patted my wallet where Dad's letter waited. Trust the process. My new apartment was a studio in a building that smelled like cabbage and cigarette smoke. The landlord called it cozy. I called it survival. Word spread fast in Portland's social circles. Naomi Fletcher lost everything, they whispered. Poor woman, disinherited at her age. Former friends stopped calling. Lunch invitations disappeared. When I ran into old acquaintances at the grocery store, they'd suddenly remember urgent appointments. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It was the shame. I'd been a successful marketing consultant before taking time off to care for Dad during his illness. Now I was just the middle-aged woman who'd been foolish enough to trust family. Every night, I spread Dad's letter on my kitchen counter and read it while eating microwave dinners. The truth lives in patience, not anger. Some nights I wanted to scream. I wanted to hire lawyers, file lawsuits, expose Victoria's manipulation to anyone who'd listen. But Dad's words held me back. Trust the process. What process? I'd lost my home, my inheritance, my social standing. I lived in an apartment where the neighbors fought at 2 a.m. and the elevator broke twice a week. But I kept reading that letter. Kept believing Dad had left me something more important than money. I just had to figure out what. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was updating my resume. The voice on the phone was crisp, professional. Miss Fletcher? This is Bernard Whitmore. I believe your father mentioned me. I nearly dropped my coffee. Mr. Whitmore. Yes, he did. I've been waiting for your call, but I understand you needed time. Are you available to meet this afternoon? His office occupied the top floor of a building downtown, all glass and polished wood. Whitmore himself was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Your father was a brilliant man, he said, gesturing to a chair. He planned everything meticulously. I don't understand. Preston Hughes handled Dad's will. Mr. Hughes handled Victoria's will, Whitmore corrected. Your father created a separate estate structure 3 years ago, after his cancer diagnosis. He opened a folder. Tell me, Miss Fletcher, did Victoria ever ask about your father's business holdings? She knew he owned Fletcher Consulting. That was sold to pay medical bills. Whitmore smiled. The consulting firm, yes. But your father had other investments. Property holdings. Trust funds. Assets that Victoria couldn't touch because they weren't part of the marital estate. My heart raced. What are you saying? I'm saying your father gave Victoria the visible wealth, the house, the cars, the obvious accounts. But the real assets. He slid a document across his desk. Those are in your name. They always have been. The document Whitmore showed me listed properties I'd never heard of, commercial buildings in Seattle, a warehouse complex in Tacoma, and investment accounts worth more than the house Victoria had evicted me from. Your father established these holdings years before he married Victoria, Whitmore explained. They're protected by prenuptial agreements and trust structures she never knew existed. But why didn't he tell me? Because he knew Victoria would contest anything obvious. By making the inheritance invisible, he protected it. Whitmore leaned forward. He also gave you something more valuable than money, leverage. I don't want leverage. I want my father back. Of course. His expression softened. But your father understood human nature. He knew Victoria would overreach. He knew Kyle would waste resources. He wanted you to have power when you needed it most. The papers felt heavy in my hands. Fletcher Properties, LLC. Fletcher Investment Trust. My name appeared on every page as sole beneficiary and decision-maker. Victoria has no idea, I whispered.
None.
She's been managing what she thinks is the entire estate, spending freely, making plans. Whitmore's smile was slight but meaningful. Meanwhile, you control the assets that actually matter. What do I do now? That depends. Do you want immediate justice or lasting victory? I thought about Dad's letter, about patience, about chess games where you sacrifice the queen. I want to wait, I said. Let her keep thinking she won. Whitmore nodded approvingly. Your father said you'd choose wisely. Walking out of Whitmore's office, I felt different. The shame that had weighed on me for months lifted slightly. I wasn't the helpless woman everyone pitied. I was a property owner, an investor, a person with options. But I kept that knowledge hidden. No lawsuits. No confrontations. No social media posts exposing Victoria's cruelty. Instead, I chose invisibility. I kept my studio apartment. Kept driving my 10-year-old car. When former friends asked how I was doing, I shrugged and said, getting by. Let them think I was broken. Let Victoria believe her victory was complete. Meanwhile, I met regularly with Whitmore, learning about my father's business empire. He'd been smarter than anyone realized, building wealth quietly while Victoria focused on appearances. Your father called this the long game, Whitmore said during one meeting. Quick revenge feels good for a moment. But real justice? That takes time. I thought about Kyle's smirk at the funeral, about Victoria's cold eyes as she handed me the eviction notice, about relatives who'd turned away rather than help. They'd chosen sides. They'd chosen wrong. But I wouldn't tell them yet. I'd wait until the perfect moment, when Victoria's facade cracked naturally, when Kyle's incompetence became obvious, when everyone could see the truth without me saying a word. I'll wait, I told Whitmore. As long as it takes. He smiled. Your father would be proud. I returned to work 3 months after Dad's funeral. My former consulting firm welcomed me back. They'd kept my position open, respecting my caregiving leave. We're glad you're back, my manager said. You were always one of our strongest analysts. I'd forgotten how good work felt. The problems were solvable. The results were measurable. Success depended on skill, not family politics. My colleagues treated me normally. They knew about Dad's death, but nothing about the inheritance drama. To them, I was just Naomi, the consultant who handled difficult clients with grace. Within 2 months, I was promoted to senior analyst. Within 4 months, I was leading projects again. You haven't missed a beat, my manager observed. If anything, you're sharper than before. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose. Or maybe because I'd finally stopped trying to please everyone and focused on what I did well. After work, I'd return to my small apartment and review investment reports with Whitmore. Dad's properties were performing well. The Seattle buildings had steady tenants. The Tacoma warehouse complex was appreciating in value. You're a wealthy woman, Whitmore reminded me. But I still lived simply. Still drove my old car. Still shopped at discount stores. Because Victoria was watching. She had spies everywhere, former family friends who reported back, neighbors who shared gossip, social media connections who tracked my posts. Let them see struggle. Let them report failure. The truth could wait. A year after Dad's death, I heard through the family grapevine that Victoria was having financial troubles. The house required expensive repairs, new roof, foundation work, outdated electrical systems. The luxury cars needed maintenance. Property taxes were higher than she'd calculated. She stressed, Aunt Phyllis mentioned during a chance encounter at the grocery store. Managing Howard's estate isn't easy. I nodded sympathetically, hiding my knowledge that she wasn't managing Dad's real estate at all, just the expensive shell he'd left her. Victoria had assumed Dad's wealth would last forever. She'd refinanced the house to buy Kyle a new car. She'd taken expensive vacations. She'd redecorated every room with designer furniture. Now the bills were coming due. She's looking for investment opportunities, Phyllis continued. Something to generate income. Do you know anyone in commercial real estate? I almost laughed. Victoria was desperate for the exact assets I controlled, and she had no idea. I'll keep my ears open, I said. That week, Whitmore called with news. One of Victoria's financial advisors contacted me about purchasing the Seattle properties. They're representing an anonymous client. Let me guess, Victoria? Almost certainly. She knows those buildings exist, but doesn't know who owns them. He paused. What would you like me to do? I thought carefully. Tell them the owner isn't interested in selling, but might consider a management partnership under the right terms. You want to dangle opportunity? I want to see how desperate she gets. Kyle's incompetence became public 6 months later. He'd convinced Victoria to invest in a restaurant venture, an upscale bistro downtown that he promised would triple their money. It failed within 90 days. The location was perfect. Kyle insisted to anyone who'd listen. The chef had credentials. It wasn't my fault. But everyone knew the truth. Kyle had no business experience. He'd hired friends instead of qualified staff. He'd spent money on luxury finishes while ignoring basic operations. Victoria lost $200,000. I heard about it from Whitmore, who'd heard from other attorneys. She's panicking, he said. The restaurant failure exposed how thin her finances really are. And Kyle? Apparently, there were heated arguments. Victoria's realizing her son isn't the business genius she thought. I felt no satisfaction in Kyle's failure, just a quiet recognition that Dad had been right. Give people enough rope, he used to say, and they'll reveal their true character. Kyle had revealed himself as someone who spent other people's money badly and blamed everyone else when things collapsed. Meanwhile, I continued working, continued saving, continued building a reputation as someone reliable and skilled. My coworkers didn't know I owned commercial properties. They just knew I was good at my job. And that was enough for now. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A nonprofit organization dedicated to small business development needed a new director of operations. The position would oversee their property holdings and community partnerships. The organization was funded partially by the Fletcher Investment Trust, the trust Dad had created, the one I now controlled. Whitmore called me personally. This could be interesting, he said. You'd be working with assets you technically own, but nobody needs to know that yet. I applied. My consulting experience and my background in project management made me a strong candidate. During interviews, I never mentioned my connection to the Fletcher Trust. They offered me the position. You'll be working closely with our major donors, the board president explained. Some of them have specific interests in downtown development projects. I look forward to it, I said, signing the contract. What I didn't say, those downtown development projects included buildings Victoria desperately wanted access to, buildings I'd inherited from Dad, buildings that could solve her financial problems if she only knew who controlled them. On my first day, I learned that Victoria's financial advisor had requested another meeting about potential partnerships. The advisor was scheduled to present at next month's board meeting. I marked the date on my calendar and smiled. Chess pieces were moving into position. The nonprofit's annual fundraising gala was held at a downtown hotel. I attended in a simple black dress, nothing flashy. I wasn't there to draw attention. I was there to observe. Victoria arrived in designer everything, dress, shoes, jewelry that sparkled under the chandeliers. Kyle accompanied her, looking bored and checking his phone constantly. I watched from across the room as Victoria worked the crowd, laughing loudly, touching people's arms, performing the social dance she'd perfected. Then she saw me. Her expression flickered. Confusion, then recognition, then something cold and dismissive. She whispered something to Kyle, who glanced my way and smirked. They approached with drinks in hand. Naomi, Victoria said, her voice dripping with false warmth. I didn't know you'd be here. Are you volunteering? I work here, I replied calmly. Director of Operations. Her smile tightened. How nice. It's good to see you landing on your feet. The implication was clear. After I gave you nothing, look how you're scraping by.
Kyle laughed.
Nonprofits don't pay much, do they? Must be tough after living in Dad's house all those years. I met his eyes without flinching. I'm comfortable. Of course you are, Victoria said, patting my arm condescendingly. We all adjust to our circumstances eventually. They walked away, Victoria already turning to more important guests. In her mind, I was irrelevant, a footnote to her victory, a cautionary tale she could share about ungrateful stepchildren.
Perfect.
Let her keep thinking that. 3 weeks later, Victoria's financial advisor presented a proposal to our board. The advisor, a man named Harold Brennan, spread glossy presentations across the conference table. My client is interested in partnering with your organization on downtown revitalization, he explained. She has capital available and significant community connections. The board members leaned forward, intrigued. I sat quietly at the end of the table, reviewing the proposal. It was clever. Victoria would provide initial funding in exchange for management rights to several properties, including 2 buildings I owned through the Fletcher Trust. What are the specific terms?
I asked.
Brennan glanced at me, clearly not expecting questions from the operations director. Standard partnership agreement. 60-40 revenue split, with my client maintaining operational control. And who is your client? I'm not at liberty to say until the agreement is signed. He smiled smoothly. But I assure you, she's a respected community member with extensive experience. I made a note on my pad. The properties mentioned in Section 4, do you know their current ownership structure? Brennan hesitated. They're held by a private trust, but we've been assured the trust is open to partnerships. By whom? His smile faded slightly. That's privileged information. Actually, I said, pulling out my own folder. Those properties are held by the Fletcher Investment Trust. And as the trust's administrator, I can tell you we're not interested in the terms you've outlined. The room went silent. Brennan's face paled. You're the Fletcher Trust administrator? I am. And your proposal significantly undervalues those properties while giving your client control she hasn't earned. I was told the trust would be cooperative. You were told wrong. After the meeting, the board president pulled me aside. You didn't mention you controlled those properties. You didn't ask, I replied. I'm here to do good work, not list my assets. He studied me carefully. Brennan was representing Victoria Fletcher, wasn't he? Howard Fletcher's widow. Most likely. And you're Howard's daughter. The one who was.
He stopped, suddenly understanding.
The one who was supposedly disinherited. The one who was strategically positioned. I corrected. Over the following months, my role expanded. The board asked me to review all property acquisitions and partnerships. They valued my judgment, my attention to detail, my unwillingness to accept deals that didn't serve the organization's mission. What they didn't fully grasp yet was that my decisions were also affecting Victoria's options. Every property deal she wanted, I could approve or deny. Every partnership she proposed, I could restructure or refuse. Not out of revenge, out of sound business practice. But the effect was the same. Slowly, carefully, I was closing the doors Victoria thought would stay open forever. She still didn't know I controlled the locks. Family members started reaching out 6 months after the gala. Aunt Phyllis called first. Naomi, I've been thinking about you lately, she said, her voice careful. How are you doing? I'm well, thank you. I heard you're working with some important development projects downtown. That's wonderful. It's fulfilling work. Silence stretched between us. Then, I wanted to apologize for not being more supportive after Howard's funeral. I should have asked more questions. It's fine, Aunt Phyllis. Victoria has been struggling lately. Financial pressures. She asks about you sometimes, wondering if you might be willing to help with some business connections. There it was. The real reason for the call. I'm focused on my work right now, I said politely. But I appreciate you reaching out. Cousin Troy called next, then Uncle Bernard, then others who'd avoided me 18 months ago. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Awkward pleasantries, vague apologies, subtle requests for favors or connections. They'd heard whispers, seen my name mentioned in business circles, realized I wasn't the defeated, disinherited daughter they'd pitted. I stayed polite but distant. No anger, no accusations, just a professional courtesy that made clear our relationship had changed permanently. They'd chosen their side when it mattered. Now they wanted to switch teams. But some doors, once closed, stay closed. Victoria's direct request came via email, sent to my work address. Dear Naomi, I hope this message finds you well. I've been thinking about our family situation and would like to discuss potential business opportunities that might benefit us both. I understand you've made valuable professional connections. Perhaps we could meet for coffee?
Victoria.
I stared at the email for a long moment. This was the woman who'd humiliated me at my father's funeral, who'd evicted me publicly, who'd told relatives I was unstable and greedy. Now she wanted my help, without acknowledging any wrongdoing, without apologizing, without recognizing her cruelty. I forwarded the email to Whitmore with a single question. Is she broke yet? His response came within an hour. Close. The house is mortgaged. Kyle's restaurant debt exceeded initial reports. She's liquidating assets to stay afloat. She's desperate, Naomi. But not humble. I replied to Victoria's email professionally. I'm available Thursday at 2 p.m. at my office. Not coffee. Not neutral ground. My territory. She arrived exactly on time, dressed expensively, but with noticeable strain around her eyes. The confidence she'd radiated at Dad's funeral had cracked. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sitting across from my desk. Of course. What can I do for you? She explained her situation carefully. Financial pressures, unexpected expenses, Kyle's failed ventures, all framed as temporary setbacks requiring strategic partnerships. I need access to investment opportunities, she finished. I hear you have connections to property trusts. I do. Could you facilitate an introduction? Perhaps to the Fletcher Trust administrators. I kept my expression neutral. I could. But these partnerships require significant vetting. I understand. Tell me, Victoria, do you remember my father's funeral? Her face tightened. That was a difficult day for everyone. You gave me an eviction notice. In front of 200 people. That was business. Estate management requires difficult decisions. And now you want my help with business? She met my eyes, and for a moment I saw something real beneath her polished exterior. Fear. I was protecting Kyle's future. Surely you understand a mother's instinct. I understand that actions have consequences, I replied. I'll consider your request. The formal board meeting took place 2 weeks later. Victoria attended as a prospective partner, presenting her revised proposal with Harold Brennan beside her. I sat at the head of the table. My new position as board vice president gave me that authority. Victoria's eyes widened slightly when she saw where I was sitting, but she maintained her composure. Brennan presented their proposal smoothly, emphasizing Victoria's community connections and financial resources. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, I said when he finished. Now, let me clarify the actual structure you'd be partnering with. I pulled up a presentation on the screen. Fletcher Investment Trust. Fletcher Properties, LLC. The full asset list Dad had left me. The Fletcher Trust isn't just a minor stakeholder in this organization, I explained. It's the primary funding source. And I'm not just connected to these properties. I own them. I inherited them from my father 18 months ago. Victoria's carefully composed expression shattered. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's impossible, she whispered. Howard's estate was divided strategically, I finished. You received the visible assets. I received the ones that actually generate wealth. The board members exchanged glances, piecing together the family drama they'd heard whispers about. Your proposal, I continued, addressing Victoria directly, significantly undervalues property you're desperate to access. It also grants you control you haven't earned and wouldn't maintain responsibly. You can't do this, Victoria said, her voice rising. Your father meant for me to. My father meant for me to learn patience, I interrupted calmly. He meant for me to understand that real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. This is revenge.
No.
This is business. And I'm declining your proposal. The room stayed silent as Victoria stood, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. Harold Brennan gathered papers hurriedly, avoiding everyone's eyes. I'll sue, Victoria said at the door. I'll prove your father wasn't in his right mind when he protected his daughter from a woman who married him for money. I kept my voice level. Good luck with that. She left without another word. Kyle's public unraveling happened 3 days later at a downtown restaurant. I wasn't there, but 5 people who witnessed it called me afterward. Apparently, Kyle confronted one of the board members, a prominent businessman who'd attended Dad's funeral, demanding to know why his mother had been humiliated by that vindictive witch. Your stepmother asked for business partnerships she couldn't sustain, the board member reportedly replied calmly. That's not humiliation. That's reality. Kyle, drunk and angry, had shouted about Inheritan's theft, about daughters who couldn't accept their place, about professionals who should mind their own business. Security escorted him out while other diners watched and recorded on their phones. By evening, the incident was circulating on social media. Local business groups shared the videos with knowing commentary. This is Howard Fletcher's son? No wonder Victoria needed help. Kyle's outburst accomplished what I never could have. It showed everyone exactly who he was beneath the expensive clothes and fake confidence. Entitled, incompetent, volatile. The next day, 2 of Kyle's business contacts pulled out of ventures with him. Within a week, he'd lost his consulting contract with a local firm that valued discretion. His mother can't protect him anymore, Whitmore observed during our weekly meeting. She has no leverage left. She never really had leverage, I replied. Just the illusion of it. Victoria's job application arrived at our nonprofit's HR department 4 months later. She was applying for a position as community outreach coordinator, a mid-level role that paid half what she was used to making. The HR director brought the application to me personally. I know your history with Mrs. Fletcher, she said carefully. Should I reject this automatically? I reviewed the application. Victoria had listed impressive credentials, her volunteer work, social connections, fundraising experience. On paper, she was qualified. Process it normally, I said. If she interviews well, consider her fairly. You're not opposed to hiring her? I'm opposed to unprofessional behavior, not to giving people opportunities they've earned. Victoria's interview was professional. She answered questions competently, demonstrated knowledge of nonprofit operations, and didn't mention our family relationship. The hiring committee recommended her unanimously. She needs this job, the HR director told me after the decision. Her house is in foreclosure. Kyle is unemployed. This position literally keeps her afloat. I approved the hire. Victoria started 2 weeks later. Her desk was 3 doors down from my office. She would report to me indirectly through the outreach department head. The first day, she stopped by my office. Thank you for not blocking this. I don't block qualified candidates, I replied. But understand, this is a professional environment. Our family history stays outside these walls. I understand. And, Victoria, if you manipulate, undermine, or create drama here, you'll be terminated immediately. Not because of our past. Because that behavior doesn't belong in this organization. She nodded, her face pale. The powerful woman who'd orchestrated my public humiliation now depended on my professional mercy. That was justice enough. Working with Victoria was strange at first. She was competent at her job, organized, detail-oriented, effective at community engagement. The social skills she'd used to manipulate family translated well into legitimate professional networking. I treated her exactly like any other employee. No special privileges. No subtle punishments. Just professional expectations and consistent feedback. The restraint confused her more than cruelty would have. Why aren't you making this harder for me? She asked during a quarterly review. I destroyed your reputation. I took your home. You tried to take those things, I corrected. You succeeded temporarily. But my father built protections you didn't understand. I underestimated you. You underestimated him. She was quiet for a moment. Kyle is working at a call center now. He blames me for everything. That must be difficult. I thought I was protecting him by securing Howard's estate. I thought money would solve all his problems. She laughed bitterly. Instead, it revealed all his weaknesses. I didn't respond. This wasn't my job to fix. You could make my life miserable here, Victoria continued. You have that power now. Power used for revenge is wasted power, I said, echoing something Dad used to tell me. I prefer to use it for building things that matter. She studied my face. Your father would be proud of you. I know, I said simply, because Dad's letter had told me exactly that. In advance, before Victoria had proven herself cruel, before Kyle had revealed himself incompetent, before patience had revealed itself as the strongest weapon. Dad had known. He'd prepared me. And he'd been right. 6 months into Victoria's employment, she requested a private meeting. We sat in my office after hours, the building quiet around us. I need to tell you something, she began, her hands twisted in her lap. Something I've never admitted to anyone. I waited. I was afraid of you, she said quietly. From the moment I married your father, you were educated, accomplished, independent. You had Howard's respect in ways I never could. So you tried to destroy that? I tried to make myself essential by making you dispensable. She met my eyes. At the funeral, when I gave you that eviction notice, I felt powerful, like I'd finally won some competition I'd invented in my head. And now I understand I won nothing. I lost Howard's real legacy because I couldn't see past my own insecurity. It was the closest thing to an apology Victoria could manage, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging truth. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because you deserve to know. And because I'm tired of pretending I was justified. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not because it benefits me to say so, but because it's true. After she left, I sat in the quiet office, thinking about Dad's letter, about patience, about how sometimes people need to lose everything before they can see anything clearly. Victoria hadn't become a different person, but she'd become a humbled one. And maybe that was the best outcome possible. The family dinner invitation arrived from Aunt Phyllis 3 months later. A reunion, she called it, a chance to reconnect. I almost declined. Then I decided showing up might be interesting. 20 relatives gathered at Phyllis's house, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who'd avoided me when I needed support. They clustered around me now, asking about my work, complimenting my success, pretending their previous silence hadn't happened. We always knew you'd do well, Uncle Bernard said, raising his glass. Did you? I asked. Because I remember asking for help and you told me Victoria had legal documents. His smile faded. That was complicated. No, it was simple.
You chose power over family.
That was your right. But don't pretend otherwise now. The room went quiet. Cousin Troy approached carefully. You're right to be angry. I'm not angry, I replied. I'm just clear about who people actually are when situations matter. Will you forgive us? Aunt Phyllis asked. I considered the question honestly. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn through changed behavior. We want to try. Then try. But understand, our relationships are different now. You showed me where I stand in your priorities. I believe you. Later, Victoria arrived with Kyle. She stayed near the edges of the room, not presuming closeness. Kyle looked smaller somehow, his arrogance replaced with something quieter and more uncertain. He approached me near the end of the evening. I was a jerk at Dad's funeral. You were. I'm sorry. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else should I say, Kyle? You made choices. They had consequences. Now you live with them. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. A year after Victoria started working at the nonprofit, she requested help with a legal matter. The house foreclosure was proceeding, and she needed advice about protecting her remaining assets. She asked if I could recommend an attorney. I gave her Whitmore's number. He's expensive, I warned. But he's excellent at protecting what matters. Can I afford him? That's between you and him. But he does payment plans for clients with legitimate need. Victoria met with Whitmore twice before returning to my office. He says I can save my mother's jewelry and some personal items, but the house is gone. There's nothing I can do. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. She said it without accusation. And that's fair. I took your home. Now I'm losing mine. That's how karma works. I never wanted you homeless, Victoria. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. I know. That's what makes this harder. You're not cruel. You're just right. The foreclosure proceeded. Victoria moved into a small apartment across town. Kyle moved in with his girlfriend. The life Victoria had built on Dad's visible wealth dissolved completely. But she kept her job, kept showing up, kept doing good work. I can't protect you from consequences you created, I told her when she thanked me for not firing her. But I won't add punishment you haven't earned through your work here. That's more grace than I deserve. Maybe. But it's the grace my father would have shown. And I'm his daughter in ways that matter more than inheritance. 2 years after Dad's funeral, I bought a house. Not a mansion, just a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden my mother would have loved. I hung Dad's letter in a frame above my desk, right next to a photo of him from before the cancer, before Victoria, before everything complicated. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. He'd been right. The process had hurt, the public humiliation, the family betrayal, the lonely months in that small apartment. But it had also revealed truth. Victoria worked at the nonprofit still, competent and quiet. Kyle found steady employment at a tech company, learning finally that consistency mattered more than flash. Family members stayed distant, understanding without being told that trust, once broken, rebuilt slowly if at all. And me? I stood in my home, bought with money I'd earned and inherited legitimately, and felt something I'd forgotten during Dad's illness. Peace. Not because I destroyed Victoria. Not because Kyle had failed. But because I'd stayed true to Dad's final lesson. Real power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need public victories or dramatic confrontations. Real power is knowing who you are when everything is stripped away, then building something genuine from that foundation. I'd won without raising my voice. Without revenge. Without becoming the villain Victoria expected. I'd simply waited for truth to surface naturally, the way Dad knew it would. And standing in my home, surrounded by simple furniture and genuine accomplishments, I understood Dad's greatest gift. Not money, not property, not even justice. His gift was teaching me that integrity, patience, and self-respect were inheritances no one could take away. Not through legal documents, not through public humiliation, not through family betrayal. Those were mine. They always had been. And they always would be.